On Primetime Politics tonight, record membership sales for the Conservative Party leadership race. What do the numbers tell us about momentum and what happens next? I'll speak with Conservative Party President Rob Batherson. The federal government opens the application process to create the office of a special representative to combat Islamophobia. The Minister of Diversity and Inclusion will join me to discuss that. And our panel of parliamentary journalists on the Conservative leadership race and the concerns of the Chief Justice about political attacks on the judiciary. Well, the numbers were in this weekend, and they show the Conservative Party on track to set a record for membership sales for any political party in Canadian history. While the numbers have yet to be confirmed, it's believed as many as 600,000 people have taken out memberships and are eligible to cast a ballot for the next party leader. The campaign of the perceived frontrunner, Pierre, says it signed up more than 300,000 new members on its own. Patrick Brown's camp also released numbers saying it brought in 150,000 members. The party itself won't confirm membership numbers until all of the sales can be reviewed. So, what do those numbers mean and what to watch for next? Robert Batherson is the president of the Conservative Party of Canada. He joins me now from Halifax. Mr. Batherson, good to see you again. Thanks for taking time to speak with me this evening. Can you give me a better idea of what the number is now for the total memberships in your party after this selling blitz for the leadership race ended on Friday?
It's early to provide a final, accurate number of memberships in good standing for a host of reasons. One, it takes time to process and verify, and our staff are working long hours, including weekends, to make sure that the person who applies for a membership is actually paid for a membership. Our system has to look for duplicates as well. Sometimes people in good faith forget they have a membership and buy another one. And then once we go through that process, and we're looking at a number of weeks to finalize our own internal work, a preliminary list of members will be provided to all 6 campaigns. That's provided for in our leadership rules. And then the 6 campaigns will have an opportunity to challenge memberships that they may feel aren't eligible to vote. And then after that challenge period is over, the party will produce a final national voters list. And that final national voters list will give us the actual number of eligible voters.
Okay, I mean, we're flashing a number on the screen here that says 600,000 and while you can't confirm that, you say it's too early to confirm those numbers. Is that number a possibility based on preliminary sort of information?
I think it's fair to say we've got to let the process unfold. We've got to let the verifications take place internally. And it wouldn't be fair to confirm or deny a particular number that once the process is over, we may have to adjust. So at this stage, we can confirm it's going to be a big number. We can confirm that it will set a record. But in terms of what that actual number will be, we have to let the process unfold as it should. It's the same process, by the way, that we followed in 2017 and 2020. For example, in 2020, our membership cutoff was May the 15th. We didn't announce the final numbers until the middle of July. So it's not as if this is a new delay that's been brought about in this process. With a mail-in ballot, this just requires a lot of time.
Okay, so based on what you just told me there, so we'd be looking at 6 to 8 weeks before we get an accurate number?
I think it's reasonable to expect a number at some point in July. The leadership rules provide that we have the last possible date to provide the national voters list is July the 29th, and it's the national voters list the accurate number of eligible voters. So July 29th is the last possible date. We're working very hard to get that done as quickly as possible, but we have to make sure that it's done correctly, and we have to make sure that we follow the rules as laid out with that preliminary voters list, the challenge period for the campaigns, and then the final list by which we'll have the actual final number of voters.
Okay, got it. Initially, when the leadership contest began, we heard the party was thinking, expecting to reach maybe 400,000 members. Now we see this possibility that it's closer to 600,000 or more. What do you believe that says about the interest in the leadership race?
There's a lot of interest in this leadership race because I think Canadians want to change a government. And the Conservative Party of Canada is the only party capable of replacing Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. The NDP have sort of given up that right in forming their deal. The Bloc Québécois is focused on one province. And quite frankly, as Canadians are struggling with the cost of living, as they're struggling with a whole host of issues, it's only the Conservative Party that can replace the Liberals. And so I think people who are increasingly dissatisfied and upset with the Liberal government, they're turning to the Conservative Party. They're buying memberships because they see the winner of this leadership race as the likely next Prime Minister and the person who can bring about the change that Canadians are increasingly looking for.
The Poilievre camp says it sold 311,000 memberships, and I don't think you're in any position to confirm that. I don't think you want to go there. But I want to ask you a broader question. People looking at those kinds of numbers from Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Brown's released his numbers. Jean Charest says he's done really well too. But they might look at Pierre Poilievre's numbers and say, wow, if he sold that many memberships, his victory's got to be a slam dunk. And from someone who knows the process, is that the right way to interpret membership sales versus leadership outcome?
You know, as president and as a member of the Leadership Election Organizing Committee, really not my place to analyze the impact of the various claims coming out from the different leadership camps. I know in talking to Ian Brody, the chair of the Leadership Election Organizing Committee, my colleagues on National Council, my colleagues on LEOC, we're very grateful to all six candidates, all six campaigns who are working hard to sell memberships and increase our membership base.
Okay. Look, I've been hearing anecdotally that people who aren't even Conservatives, have no intention of voting Conservative in a federal election, have been buying memberships to have a say in the leadership race and trying to block certain candidates or favor other candidates from winning a race in a party they don't even belong to. What have you heard about that?
In a leadership race, you're going to hear all kinds of stories. There are going to be all kinds of claims. And so I think it's important not to jump on every particular claim or anecdote. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that's why we provide the leadership campaigns with a challenge process. If there are known members of other political parties who have joined the Conservative Party of Canada, there will be an opportunity for each of the campaigns to challenge that process, and that's why the process is there, to allow for a challenge.
But these would be people who don't belong to another political party, but aren't, might say that they have no intention of voting Conservative, because your rules just say you have to believe in Conservative principles and you can't be a card-carrying member of another party. So that leaves a fair bit of room, doesn't it, for people to influence a leadership race even though they don't support and don't plan to support your party?
Well, that's why we have the challenge process. And so if any campaign feels that there are people who don't believe in the principles of the Conservative Party of Canada, which is a required question that we expect all members to answer in the affirmative, then they will have an opportunity to challenge that, and it'll be the party's chief returning officer that would make a determination as to whether a member is in fact in good standing, which means that they would support the principles of the Conservative Party of Canada. Keep in mind that if we're going to increase our membership of the party, chances are we're going to get individuals who may have supported other parties in the past. And so again, we can only go on evidence. We can only go on what the campaigns themselves bring forward as part of the challenge process, and then it'll be a decision of the chief returning officer.
All right, Rob Batherson, always great to talk to you and get your perspective. I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk again as the race continues. I appreciate your time tonight. Take care. Thanks,
Peter. Anytime.
And we'll have more discussion on the Conservative leadership race with our panel of parliamentary journalists coming up a little bit later. Well, it's been a year since the nation was rocked by a brutal hate attack in London, Ontario. 4 members of the Afzal family were run down and killed by a 20-year-old driver simply because they were Muslim. Their deaths were marked with vigils and marches, and there have been other hate attacks on Muslims in Canada, including the mass shooting at the mosque in Quebec City in 2017. Today, the federal government moved forward on a promise to create the Office of the Special Representative to Combat Islamophobia by opening the process for applications to fill that role. But the NDP leader says the government isn't moving fast enough to tackle the problem of Islamophobia.
So a year after this horrific attack, and years after the previous attack in Quebec, it is simply wrong that the government has taken so long to put anything forward to tackle online hate. We can always start with an immediate measure of some tool for us to remove those type of messages immediately at the federal level with the powers that we have, and then work to find ways to improve that.
Ahmed Hussen is Canada's Minister of Housing and Diversity and Inclusion, and he joins me now. Minister, it's good to see you again, and thank you for taking time to speak with me tonight. First of all, look, this is a solemn anniversary, the one-year anniversary of the Afzal family members being killed in London, Ontario. And I guess I'm wondering, what are your reflections about the loss and concerns about the depth of Islamophobia in this country?
Well, it's the one-year anniversary, as you said, since the London attack. It's the 5-year anniversary since the Quebec City mosque shooting. And since that time, and before that time, and after that time, there's been a number of incidents. And Islamophobia is real. It's a troubling fact in Canada, and it is a reality for far too many members of the Canadian Muslim community. And we have to do everything that we can to work to eradicate Islamophobia from Canada.
The creation of the special representative to combat Islamophobia was the chief recommendation from the Islamophobia Summit last July, and you announced the promise to create this position back in January. Why has it taken so long just to get to the opening of the application process, 6 months here to get that started?
Because we have to do things right, and part of doing things right is to engage the very community that this recommendation came from, which is the Canadian Muslim community. And we've been engaging them throughout the process to make sure that as we develop the mandate, as we develop the framework of the special representative, the team that will support the special representative, the budget that is needed to support the work of the special representative. All of those things are things that we have been engaging the Muslim community on to make sure that we're getting it right, to make sure that they have confidence in the process and eventually in the outcome. And so today is another big step in that journey. It's the announcement of the opening of the call for applications. Hopefully, a critical mass of people apply, and we are then able to move forward with an open, transparent, merit-based process so that we can appoint as quickly as possible the special representative.
And do you have a timeline for that? When do you expect the special representative to actually be on the job?
It would obviously depend on the level of interest and the number of applications that we receive, but we will move as quickly as possible to conclude the merit-based, transparent, open process for the selection. And once that is completed, we will move ahead with the appointment as quickly as possible. This individual will be a champion, an advisor, and an expert on Islamophobia, and they will work with other institutions, other orders of government, as well as being the main advisor to the Government of Canada.
Let me ask you about that. The office will have a budget of $1.2 million. What is the mandate of this special representative? What actual powers will this individual have to influence, for instance, government policies to deal with Islamophobia in this country?
As I said, they'll bring expertise to the table. They will have the power of being the main advisor on Islamophobia to the Government of Canada. They will be the champion for these issues. They will do research. They will issue recommendations. They will, help us to move forward on further steps that we can take to tackle hate, to tackle Islamophobia. And as we take a human rights-based approach to this process and many other work initiatives that we are doing to combat hate in all its forms, this is yet another important step that we're taking to combat hate. And I can tell you that this special representative will be critical in our engagement with the Muslim community and making sure that Canadian Muslims, in addition to other religious and racialized communities in Canada, feel safe and are indeed safe in their own communities.
Okay, just to be clear on what this role would be, what kind of powers will this person have? I mean, look at what's happening in the province of Quebec, where the Muslim community there and other minority communities feel targeted by some of the provincial laws that have been well noted in Quebec. They feel that they reflect or contribute to Islamophobia. Will this person, for instance, be given, the authority, the powers to launch legal action against provincial laws they think feed Islamophobia?
Well, we have a responsibility as a government to defend the rights of all Canadians. I think what we're trying to do with this appointment is to make sure that we bring expertise to the table. We make sure that there is a focal point in the government for critical, important advice, and someone who's actually championing this and is given the tools to do the work across government and across different stakeholders and institutions. That is the way to do proper government policy. The best way to create good government policy in Ottawa is to talk to Canadians and to actually listen to advice and from experts, and be led by the evidence. That's what this person's main role will be.
All right, speaking of consulting and listening to advice, your government's still consulting on the promised online hate bill. When will that legislation be introduced, and what's taking so long to put that bill before Parliament?
Obviously, Minister Rodriguez and Minister Lametti are leading this. It's something that I know is a key priority for our government. The important thing is to get it right, again, to be led by the experts. We listen to experts. We listen to, and we're guided by the evidence, and the experts will get us to the right place in this. We're absolutely determined. It's a key election promise that we made, that what happens online has real world consequences, and we must tackle online hate and online harms caused to Canadians, and the social media platforms have to absolutely take responsibility for the hateful content that is sometimes placed on their platform.
You've talked a lot about wanting to get it right, and I guess, do you have any concerns about making sure that new legislation, online hate legislation, does get it right? Because some of the criticisms from the Muslim community at the same time that you're creating the office of the representative to combat Islamophobia. They've expressed concerns in the Muslim community about some of the proposed language being used for the anti-hate legislation, defining terrorist activity, content that they worry could actually increase discrimination against their community. So how do you respond to those concerns?
I've been exposed to that literature. I've actually heard that criticism, and that's part of engagement. This is why it's important to listen to communities, because they'll give you their perspective, their well-informed lived experience and expertise on proposed legislation, and that is precisely why taking the time to get it right is so important. And we will listen to Canadian Muslims as well as other religious groups and racialized communities in Canada when we're tackling this issue of online hate and online harms.
All right. Minister Hussen, thank you for your perspective. Always good to talk to you, and appreciate you taking time tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, let's bring in our panel of press gallery journalists now. Susan Delacourt's a columnist with the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance is the parliamentary bureau chief for La Presse. And John Ivison's a columnist with the National Post and parliamentary bureau chief for Post Media. It's good to see you all again. Susan, let me start with you. Conservatives are crowing about the hundreds of thousands of memberships they've sold for the leadership race. Looks like the Poilievre camp alone saying it sold more than 300,000 memberships. What do you see in those membership numbers?
Oh, I see a lot in this. I actually wrote about this for today because I'm fascinated with it. We have had good news for democracy in these things. It's always good. If people are spending $15 out of their pockets to join a political party and participate in democracy, that is good news. No question. This is a few days after we heard that in Ontario, they couldn't get more than 4 in 10 people to cast a ballot. So I'm a little perplexed about about the difference between the two. We've talked about this on this show, I think, too, that the difference between the world of difference between the Ontario election and this Conservative leadership race.
Right.
It's like they are functioning, and they continue to function in two separate universes. Mr. Poilievre, on paper right now, has a huge advantage. There is the issue of points being allocated by riding and geography. It's not as simple as, the most votes wins. But it is a strong statement that there is something motivating people to sign up and vote for the Conservative Party in a way that did not motivate people to vote last week in the Ontario provincial election.
Right.
I find that the difference fascinating.
Joël-Denis, what do you think of these membership sales? Tell us about the race. Patrick Brown put out his numbers. He says they sold 150. Pierre Poilievre more than 300,000. Jean Charest in Quebec says he did really well, but isn't drilling down too much on the numbers. So what do you see here?
Well, clearly, if Pierre Poilievre sold that many membership cards, he's got a huge advantage over his opponents. But that will depend on where those members are. If they are geographically located in one region, it's not going to be enough to win, because you need to be spread around in 338 ridings, because each riding gets 100 points. So it's a preferential ballot. So the numbers are, very impressive, but where are they located? That remains to be seen, and we'll find out in a few weeks where those memberships are. Right.
It could be. I early in the program spoke with the president of the party, who says it could be closer to the end of July before we actually get a breakdown on exactly how many members are actually how many members actually signed up. That number's around 600,000 we hear, but that'll have to be confirmed. John, what do you see here?
I think Pierre Poilievre may have it in the bag. I've been speaking to a bunch of senior Conservatives who are not aligned with the Poilievre campaign, but who have been through this exercise many times before. And, not only does he have 300,000 claimed members, there are 142,000 existing members, and you've got to imagine that he's got the lion's share of those. So something is happening here. I know that there are likely to be wrangling over the finer counts. This is not an accurate count, 311,000. Each candidate is going to get the preliminary list and is going to be able to challenge the members that the other parties, the other candidates are claiming. That is going to wheedle away at some of them. But you can't go from 300,000 to 150 very easily. I mean, I think that, it looks like at this stage, to me and to the people I'm talking to, a first ballot Poilievre win, unless his rivals can convince people over the summer who are already signed up to be members for Poilievre that he cannot win a general election, and therefore they should defect.
Yeah, and how, what's the challenge involved in that, Susan? I mean, we've talked about this before on our program, that it's all about, leadership races are all about who can sell the most memberships, because, and then convert those memberships into support. But how big of a challenge is it if Pierre Poilievre's got the lion's share of memberships here, for those other candidates to try and, in the next 2 or 3 months, try and win those people over to their side?
Well, motivation is going to be a huge factor, especially during the summer months. People don't tend to be on the edge of their seats thinking about politics in the summer months. So that's going to be one factor. I was talking to somebody today, though, who was saying Charest, as going back as far as 1993, has some experience with pulling people away. He managed to pull a lot of support away from Kim Campbell in the 1993 leadership race. Not enough to win, but he is working on that. And I looked at the Poilievre camp supplied reporters with some regional breakdowns themselves. And again, as Joël-Denis and John have been saying, these all have to be verified. But it does look like the majority of Mr. Poilievre's support is in Ontario. I think almost half of it is in Ontario. Put with Alberta, that's well over half. So Mr. Poilievre has to work on getting the other ridings out. Apparently more than 50 ridings in Ontario. He's got more than 1,000 votes. But for all of them all summer, what they have to do is keep this base motivated. And again, not to harp on this, but I was really struck by that Ontario turnout number last week and thinking what a difficult task it is right now to get people interested in politics, unless it is to be, unless it's to knock the system down.
John, let me turn to you. I want to ask you about Canada's Chief Justice, Richard Wagner, out on the weekend in an interview with Radio-Canada warning against political attacks on the Supreme Court and judicial independence. How exceptional is that kind of a move from the Chief Justice, and what do you think of the timing?
Well, it's probably not entirely unrelated to the Conservative leadership, where I think 3 of the candidates came out and said that they would use the notwithstanding clause in the recent judgment on parole for multiple murderers. Unprecedented for political candidates to do that. I mean, Stephen Harper had his problems with the Supreme Court, but he never used notwithstanding. So I think there is an element of it being specific to that. But, Wagner has been out before talking about these things. It's not like this is the first time that he's talking about reaching out to Canadians to explain how the court works.
Joël-Denis, part of this outreach program the court's involved in involves taking hearings on the road. It's done that. It's going to be doing that in Quebec later this year, right at a time when the province is dealing with legislation around identity and around language, and they'll be taking questions from the public at their stop in Quebec City. Could that be risky?
Absolutely, because we know there will be a provincial elections, and Bill 21 and Bill 96 will be very much part of the election campaign here in Quebec. So I wouldn't be surprised if some questions are put to the Chief Justice about those issues and where the Supreme Court might go. So he might get drawn into a political debate while the province is going to the polls. But the warning from Chief Justice Wagner is interesting. I would argue that he probably had one person in mind when he made that comment. Maybe Pierre Poilievre, because he's been attacking the Bank of Canada, and maybe the Chief Justice fears that the Supreme Court of Canada might be next on his line in the mind of Pierre Poilievre. So I guess it's a preemptive warning on the part of the Chief Justice that he will probably repeat this week, because he will be in Montreal to participate in a Q&A session at a Corim. It's an institute in Quebec, and he will be carrying that message through in Montreal this week as well.
Susan, what are your thoughts on this, if I can put it this way, a bit of a public relations sortie by the Chief Justice in defense of the High Court?
Oh, well, let's not forget where he was when he was talking, because he had been down in the United States when the Supreme Court leak came out on Roe versus Wade, and the emerging idea there that the courts should somehow reflect public will or the popular or populist thought rather than be a check against it. As John said, it's not the first time in Canada we've seen challenges to the Supreme Court. Stephen Harper, it was called judicial activism, and it's because of the Charter of Rights here. We've seen Ian Brodie, who was Mr. Harper's first chief of staff, actually was an academic who wrote a lot about judicial activism. So it's not a new discussion in Canada, but because of what we're seeing happening in the United States, it's an important discussion here too, because there are a lot of ways in which streams of thought from the United States have made their way, especially into, as my co-panelists said, into conservative thought right now.
All right. I want to thank you all for your time tonight. Time's short, but thanks to all of you for joining me, and we'll talk again soon. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, Peter.
And that is all for another edition of Primetime Politics. From all of us here at CPAC, I'm Peter Van Dusen. Thanks for watching.